I want to start by having you give us a little bit of background. What exactly is Google's current strategy when it comes to AI chips?
Yeah, so Google's been developing its own AI chips for a decade. They're called TPUs, tensor processing units. And these are chips that are really made by Google, designed by Google for Google. And so they've been using them for development of their own AI models, including Gemini, which, as you discussed, has had a lot of success recently. And Google also has a cloud business. And so Google has also been providing TPUs for its customers through the cloud business, and they've signed a lot of high profile deals, including Apple, Anthropic, Safe Superintelligence. But what we're reporting now is they're also starting to pitch customers on putting TPUs in their own data centers. So going beyond the cloud model that we're seeing right now and into putting chips on premises.
So, can you unpack that aspect a little bit more for me, Erin? I mean, based on your reporting, what would you articulate as the change in Google's AI strategy when it comes to chips?
Yeah, so it's going from having chips in Google's own data centers to having chips in either the data centers of neoclouds to customers like or companies like CoreWeave or directly to like the ultimate operating customer. So we talked about Google talking with Meta about a deal like this. Google's also pitching this to major financial institutions who maybe need to have data kept more safe and secure.
And these talks, Erin, if they do succeed, how could they potentially close the gap with Nvidia, who is far and away the market leader at this point in AI chips?
Right. So NVIDIA is way further ahead than Google is right now. They have a lot of advantages because, in part, GPUs, they're made for customers to be able to use them versus TPUs, the chips that Google has developed. They're very specific from everything down to like the design of the data center to how power works to how cooling works. So it's definitely an uphill battle for Google to climb in terms of getting customers comfortable using these chips. But the way Google is looking at it, it's like there's this massive market for all of these data centers. And the idea that Google could try to compete with that market is a really huge opportunity for them. And so when Google Cloud was thinking about doing this, they were asking, like, okay, like, what's the potential market? And the numbers were thrown around, like, okay, well, like, what if we could get to 10% of what NVIDIA is doing, which is like a 10 plus billion-dollar market? And so a really big there's a really big opportunity here for them, even if they aren't able to dislodge NVIDIA.
I mean, it's definitely a big opportunity. To what extent do you think it's realistic that Google really gives NVIDIA a run for their money in this space?
Look, I think it's hard. I mentioned that that GPUs are already built essentially for customer use. With TPUs, this is a lot of like what Google has to figure out is like how to get people to use it. And so part of what we reported, they're not just giving people the chips, like there's some software that goes on top of it that which is designed to make it easier for people to use. But I mean, right now Google is in a place of real momentum and especially like perceived momentum where they've been using these TPUs to train Gemini for a long time, but now with the success of it, there's, I think, maybe a moment for Google to come in and take some market share. And they've been, again, signing all of these big deals. Like there is just a deal with Anthropic, for example, for 1 million TPUs.
Right. So you noted some of the challenges in this competition. And one roadblock that I've heard a lot about to Google competing with NVIDIA is NVIDIA's CUDA software. That's the software that AI developers use to program their chips. And, from everything that I've heard, it's become somewhat of the standard amongst those developers. How exactly will Google compete in that realm?
Yeah, so what we reported on in this most recent story, so Google's pitching companies this program called TPU at premises. And like I mentioned, this is not something where they're just selling the chips. There's also some software on top. Like this is could potentially be structured as like a monthly rental fee where like Google engineers are still managing some aspect of this. And so Google completely understands that this is something where they have to teach people a new framework and it's like different than GPUs. But the way that they're trying to pitch it is this idea that this could be more cost effective. And again, there's this Gemini halo.
The big company in your story and in your reporting, Erin, is Meta. But you also said in the story, I noticed that Google is in talks with big financial institutions about the use of TPUs. What more do we know about that?
We know some more. There's some stuff that we can't couldn't put in the story. We do have some examples of who they're talking to. But this is being pitched as something that's good for companies that have very secure data needs and need to have things on premises because they don't want to send information to the cloud. And so that's part of it. There's also some interesting details where Google's trying to pitch this as something that's good for companies that are trying to do high frequency trading. And so they're definitely making a play at this financial institution market.
Well, I personally can't wait to see what details that you didn't get to put in the story that I'm sure will come out in your later reporting. Always a pleasure having you, Erin. Thanks for being here.